The Holy Roman Empire was a vast and shifting realm in Central and Western Europe ruled by German kings for nearly 1,000 years. It began in 800 AD when Charlemagne, king of the Franks, was crowned emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III, reviving the imperial title centuries after the fall of Rome. Though the name Holy Roman Empire came later, it saw itself as the Christian successor to ancient Rome with strong ties to the Pope. After Charlemagne, the empire fractured but was revived in 962 when Otto I was crowned emperor, marking the true start of the Holy Roman Empire. It was never a centralized, stable state, but rather a collection of territories, including the kingdoms of Germany, Italy, Bohemia, and Burgundy. The emperor was elected by German princes, and while the empire reached its peak under the Hohenstaufen dynasty in the 13th century, internal power struggles, external threats, and the rise of regionalism led to decline. The empire also saw waves of German migration eastward, influencing regions like Poland and the Czech lands through settlement and cultural assimilation. By the 18th century, the growing rivalry between Austria and Prussia defined its internal politics. Napoleon delivered the final blow in 1806 by forming the Confederation of the Rhine. The Confederation of the Rhine was Napoleon's strategic chessboard in Germany, established in 1806 after his victory at Austerlitz. It replaced the ailing Holy Roman Empire, turning German states into French puppets. When Austria lost the War of the Third Coalition and signed the Peace of Pressburg in 1805, Napoleon tightened his grip over Germany. He put his brothers on thrones in Naples and Holland and courted alliances with key German states. Napoleon restructured Germany by merging 112 smaller states into larger ones, secularizing church lands and elevating loyal states like Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden to grand duchies or kingdoms. By mid-1806, Napoleon got tired of negotiations and strong-armed 16 German states into signing a treaty. They were technically sovereign, but in reality they were part of a military alliance that required them to supply troops to France. Karl Theodor von Dalberg was appointed as a symbolic prince primate, but Napoleon was the real power. In 1810, Napoleon annexed chunks of northwest Germany outright to enforce his continental system, an economic blockade against Britain. Culturally, French influence spread, notably with the introduction of the Napoleonic Code affecting legal systems. But the Confederation's facade crumbled with Napoleon's failed Russian campaign in 1812. After the Battle of Leipzig in 1813, most states defected and the Confederation collapsed. The Congress of Vienna in 1815 reversed many of Napoleon's changes, but the experience under French rule inadvertently fueled German nationalism, setting the stage for future unification efforts in the 19th century. The German Confederation was established in 1815 by the Congress of Vienna in response to the dissolution of Napoleon's regime. It comprised 39 sovereign states, including Luxembourg and Liechtenstein. The Confederation aimed to maintain balance and peace in Central Europe but was structured in a way that limited effective governance. Its central body, the Federal Assembly, convened in Frankfurt and was presided over by Austria. However, decision-making was hindered by the requirement of unanimity, making significant reforms nearly impossible due to the diverse interests of its members. Federal law was supposed to supersede state law, and there were obligations for collective defense, but this was hindered due to political disagreements, especially between Austria and Prussia. The Confederation's stability was further tested by the revolutions of 1848-49, which sought liberal, democratic, and nationalistic changes. Although these movements failed to establish a unified German state, they highlighted the need for reform and contributed to the growing idea of German unity. Otto von Bismarck, appointed as Prussia's statesman in 1851, navigated this political landscape with a different strategy. His belief in blood and iron rather than diplomacy or consensus led to military and economic strengthening of Prussia. Bismarck's policies, including economic concessions to the middle class and the expansion of the German customs union, laid the groundwork for Prussian dominance. This period was also one of cultural flourishing in Germany, with philosophers like Hegel, poets like Goethe, and composers like Beethoven contributing to a rich cultural legacy. Economically, this era saw advancements that would later support the unification process. The end of the German Confederation came with the 7 Weeks' War of 1866 between Prussia and Austria. Prussia's victory in this conflict led to the dissolution of the Confederation under the Treaty of Prague. The North German Confederation was a significant milestone towards German unification, created by Prussia after the exclusion of Austria following the 7 Weeks' War. It included all German states north of the Main River and Hohenzollern territories in Swabia, but not the southern states like Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, and Hesse-Darmstadt, which remained independent. The Confederation was initially a military alliance under the North German Confederation Treaty, but evolved into a constitutional monarchy in 1867 with the Prussian king as the head of state. Legislative power was divided between the Parliament and the Federal Council, representing the states, a cooperation between conservative and liberal elements towards national unity. Tensions with France, especially over the Spanish throne, led to the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, making the southern German states align with the Confederation. This conflict accelerated the transition to the German Empire, with a new constitution effective from January 1871, and Wilhelm I proclaimed German Emperor at Versailles. The North German Confederation thus not only laid the legal groundwork for modern Germany, but also fostered a unified cultural identity among its states. The German Empire, also known as Imperial Germany or the Second Reich, spanned from 1871 after German unification until its dissolution in the November Revolution of 1918. It incorporated the southern German states into what was the North German Confederation, excluding Austria and Liechtenstein. Wilhelm I from the House of Hohenzollern was declared German Emperor, with Berlin as the capital, and Otto von Bismarck served as the first chancellor. The empire consisted of 25 states, each with its own nobility. Prussia, despite being one of 4 kingdoms, dominated both in population and territory, and its king also held the title of German Emperor. This era was also marked by the Kulturkampf, a clash between the state and the Catholic Church, and significant contributions to arts and philosophy, solidifying German cultural identity. Rapid industrialization and urbanization transformed Germany, making it a leading power in science, technology, and industry. By 1913, Germany had the largest economy in continental Europe and the 3rd largest in the world. It also had the longest railway network in Europe, the world's strongest army, and a rapidly expanding navy that by the early 20th century was second only to Britain's Royal Navy. Bismarck's rule initially included some liberal policies, but later shifted toward conservatism. Despite his opposition to socialism, he introduced early forms of social welfare like old age pensions, medical care, and unemployment insurance. Later, the empire expanded its colonial holdings, becoming the 3rd largest colonial power after Britain and France. Germany's foreign policy was marked by alliances, including the defensive dual alliance with Austria-Hungary and the triple alliance with Italy. It also maintained strong diplomatic ties with the Ottoman Empire. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary by a Bosnian Serb in 1914 triggered World War I, with Germany entering the conflict due to its defensive pact with Austria-Hungary. The war ended in 1918 with the collapse of the German Empire during the November Revolution, which led to Kaiser Wilhelm II's abdication. The Treaty of Versailles imposed severe reparations of 132 billion gold marks, which is around 270 billion US dollars, territorial losses, military restrictions, and extradition requirements on Germany, which was forced to sign without involvement in the treaty's formulation. The Weimar Republic, officially the German Reich, marked Germany's first attempt at a constitutional republic. Born from the ashes of the German Empire after World War I, this era was defined by economic devastation, social unrest and political extremism, all fueled by the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Because of the enormous reparation costs to be paid in gold, there was no more backing for the German mark currency. The early years of the Weimar Republic were a nightmare of hyperinflation. Savings vanished overnight, and economic collapse gave rise to political chaos, with assassinations, paramilitary uprisings, and attempted coups shaking the fragile democracy. From 1922 to 23, Germany faced one of the most horrific inflations the world has ever seen. Unemployment, hunger, high suicide rates, corruption, anarchy, and chaos marked this period. Prices doubled almost daily for 20 months. A loaf of bread cost 2 billion marks. The Great Depression of 1929 turned the crisis into a disaster, almost bankrupting Germany completely. Unemployment skyrocketed, the middle class was wiped out, and desperation spread like wildfire. Amid this turmoil, President Paul von Hindenburg relied on emergency decrees to support chancellors like Heinrich Brüning, Franz von Papen, and Kurt von Schleicher. But their efforts couldn't stop the growing influence of radical movements, particularly the Nazi Party. In January 1933, Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler as chancellor. Within weeks, the Reichstag Fire Decree and the Enabling Act gave Hitler unchecked power, dismantling democracy and paving the way for a totalitarian regime. By March 1933, the Weimar Republic was dead, replaced by the dictatorship of the Third Reich. Nazi Germany, officially the German Reich, existed from 1933 to 45 under Adolf Hitler and the German National Socialist Workers' Party, transforming the country into a totalitarian dictatorship. The regime referred to itself as the Third Reich, presenting itself as the successor to the Holy Roman Empire and the German Empire. After Hitler's appointment as Chancellor in 1933, the Nazis swiftly dismantled opposition and consolidated power. Following President Paul von Hindenburg's death in August 1934, Hitler merged the presidency and chancellorship, becoming the sole leader. His word became law, and the government turned into a chaotic power struggle among Nazi factions. Amid the Great Depression, the regime restored economic stability through deficit spending, massive public works like the highways, and a rearmament program that rebuilt the military. State investment was intended to stimulate demand for goods, expand income, and lift Germany out of economic recession. A new currency and monetary system based on labor treasury certificates stabilized the economy further and created jobs, fueling national support for the regime. Hitler framed National Socialism as a fusion of socialism for the common good without globalism and nationalism without capitalism, while maintaining property rights for German citizens. However, this ideology quickly descended into extreme forms of racial and ethnic persecution. Eventually, Hitler's aggressive foreign policy led to the annexation of Austria, the Sudetenland, and the invasion of Poland in 1939, igniting World War II. Nazi Germany's military campaigns initially brought territorial gains, but eventually stretched the nation's resources and led to its defeat. By May 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. Allied occupation. The collapse of Nazi Germany in 1945 led directly into the Allied occupation period, during which Germany was divided into 4 zones controlled by the United States, Soviet Union, United Kingdom, and France. This division was not just territorial but ideological, foreshadowing the Cold War's division of Europe. The Allies pursued denazification, aiming to remove Nazi influence from society. This included the Nuremberg trials, which prosecuted top Nazi leaders for war crimes. However, the extent of denazification varied, with Western zones eventually prioritizing economic recovery and Cold War alignment, while the Soviet zone conducted a more thorough purge. Economic rebuilding was a priority, particularly in the West, where the US launched the Marshall Plan in 1948, helping stabilize Western Germany and integrate it into the capitalist bloc. Meanwhile, the Soviet zone implemented socialist reforms, including land redistribution and nationalization of industry, deepening the ideological rift. Berlin, though within the Soviet zone, was also divided among the Allies and became a key Cold War battleground. The Berlin blockade saw the Soviets attempt to cut off Western access to the city in response to Western economic policies. The Western Allies countered with the Berlin Airlift, supplying West Berlin by air until the blockade was lifted. Divided Germany, East and West. By 1949, Germany split into two states, the Federal Republic of Germany and the German Democratic Republic. West Germany adopted democracy and capitalism, with Bonn as its capital. Under Chancellor Konrad Adenauer and economist Ludwig Erhard, it experienced the economic miracle fueled by the 1948 introduction of the Deutsche Mark. A full integration into NATO and the European Economic Community followed. East Germany was a Soviet-influenced communist state with a planned, state-owned economy ruled by the SED in a one-party dictatorship. The Berlin Wall, built in 1961, physically and symbolically divided the two Germanys, preventing mass immigration. Despite paying reparations to the USSR, East Germany was the strongest economy in the Eastern Bloc, though at the cost of freedom. Post-reunification, leaders like Egon Krenz faced trials for crimes under communist rule. Reunified Germany. In November 1989, peaceful protests and political shifts led to the fall of the Berlin Wall, paving the way for German reunification. A year later, East Germany held free elections, and negotiations between the two German states and the four Allied powers resulted in the final settlement treaty. On October 3, 1990, East Germany ceased to exist. Its states merged into the Federal Republic of Germany, and Berlin was reunified as the capital. Post-reunification, East Germany adopted West Germany's political system, currency and laws. A major reconstruction effort sought to modernize the East, but it took decades for the eastern regions to catch up economically, with persistent issues like unemployment and infrastructure deficits. Socially, differences in life under communism and capitalism still shaped perspectives, while the legacy of the Stasi, the brutal East German secret police, loomed over public life. Germany has since become a key player in the EU, known for climate leadership, technological innovation and diplomacy. Migration, especially the 2015 refugee crisis, sparked debates on integration and identity, influencing politics. Germany remains a strong NATO ally, focusing on economic and diplomatic influence on the world stage.